in mind?
I don't know, maybe write about this book.
Okay, yes, we're just talking about paper topics which will interest our future viewers. I suppose I should have said exactly what I said a minute ago to everyone on our video, but I'll say that in writing to them. Just for the sake of interest and to give you all some idea of how we're proceeding, do, Richard, push your little button and say what you're thinking about doing for your final paper.
I'm going to write about ceremony. That's pretty much all I know right now. Maybe tracing the destroyers and how that relates to the would you call it poetry or the
oh yes, those internal
right, because
mythic statements. Yeah, that's
I'm not sure if I have this right, but the woman that Tayo spends the last summer in the book with, is she the protagonist of the
embedded narrative,
the story within the story?
Let's get there in a minute. I guess I just want to ask Nishant also about his paper topic, because he just happened to email me, and it's a very interesting topic. But for your topic, you don't know what you're going to do with respect to ceremony. What you know is you like the book, and you can see interesting questions that should be asked. Keep in mind magical realism, of course. I mean, there is a way in which, not that I require that you say what's magical realist about this novel, but that will certainly come up, especially if you start to investigate. When we don't know who a woman is that the main character spends time with, we know there's something magical realist going on here. So anyway, I just recall that. Nishant, would you mind saying what you have in mind if you push your button there?
I was just going to do like a comparison between fantasy literature and magical realism. And I thought it up like in a haze, so I can't really remember exactly what I said, but comparing the source of magic and the use of magic in both genres, and then trying to find like links between post-modernity and modernity.
Yeah, so that's going to be very hard and very interesting. Nishant is posing that if I read you wrote it quickly and I read it quickly, your email, but it was very interesting. And what Tolkien is going to be a major focus of your paper as the science fiction, or is that what we're calling it, or we're calling it fantasy, this other kind of subcategory that you're interested in?
Fantasy literature. Or
fantasy, yeah. And then to decide about modernity and postmodernity, or I should say modernism and postmodernism. And obviously, whose courses have you taken so you have some categories for those literary, critical, and historical topics? Push your little button, will you?
I've taken British literature where we read Tolkien. So.
Yeah, okay. But you have conceptions of modernism and postmodernism, obviously.
Yeah.
Anybody else have an idea that's fairly concrete as to what you're going to do on your paper? Yeah, Tracy?
We kind of talked about it last time. I want to approach Pauline. The three narrators in the one in tracks, and why Pauline is presented how she is, and just the roles of each of them, why two narrators are shown, and how magically real each of them are. Yeah. How Nanapush is the one that seems to be the most grounded, the storyteller, and he seems the less magical of all of them.
Right, yeah, very interesting. Yeah,
but mostly about Pauline.
There's something wonderfully matter-of-fact about Nanapush, even though he's kind of the locus of the, let's say, mythic culture or the myth culture. So anybody else know? Yeah, Chris, what are you up to?
I've decided to go with House of the Spirits. A, I've read it before, and then B, I did the paper on 100 Years of Solitude and did a historical account of historical account of 100 Years of Solitude.
Yeah.
I'd like to do that with Chile a little bit now.
Oh, that's good.
Because I got the information from it from the test last semester.
Yeah, right,
I have all these resources.
Right, yeah.
And then just kind of be a little more structured in looking at historical realism and magical realism, and look where they intersect and look where they separate for
our
reading.
Good. Yeah, that's very interesting. Of course, both 100 Years of Solitude, I mean, I bookend the course with 100 Years of Solitude and The House of the Spirits, because they are so similar. They're both family sagas that go over several generations of repeating figures, mostly men in the case of the Buendias, mostly women in the case of, well, all women in a sense, in the case of Isabel Allende. So it is very interesting that you've written a paper now on the one and are going to look at the other through the same kinds of lenses, I think is good. Have you read Paula, her autobiography, Isabel Allende's autobiography? She retells the story of 100 Years of Solitude, or of House of the Spirits in her own family, and it's interesting to reread, as it were, the novel through the autobiographical focus. It's very good and very sad about the death of her 28-year-old daughter, actually. Yeah. Okay. Other questions? I mean, this is just to continue a bit the conversation about the final papers, but everybody's pretty located and grounded and prepared and all of that. If you're not, and you don't have a topic and you don't have a clue, just email me, and I'll help you if I can. And the first thing I'll say is, what did you like? So make sure to email that to me first, so I'll know. Okay, let's look at ceremony. How far have you gotten? Mainly through it? Are you pretty up on it? Okay. Since Brent back there is nodding his head enthusiastically, tell us. That's what you get. Sorry. Tell us a bit about this book. Give us an overview. Can you or will you of what's going on here? If you were standing up here, where would you start? What are you going to emphasize? Tell us.
Well, first off, the only magical real thing I found in it was, I'm going to call her a Chew. I don't know what her real name is. I can't pronounce it.
Yeah.
But in the mythic little poems he's got,
yeah,
it'd be Mother Nature, what we'd consider Mother Nature.
Yeah.
I think it's called like Tesh or Tessa or something.
Right.
When he meets her, and it's what Richard was talking about.
Yeah.
Other than that, everything is kind of like post-traumatic syndrome, war syndrome and all.
Yeah, well, there is that.
And this
yeah.
actually reads a lot like Tom O'Brien has a book called The Things They Carried.
Yeah.
Has no chapters.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a collection of short stories, and this is almost like a Native American version of that. So he got this main character, Tayo, comes back from World War II after losing his adoptive brother there, and leaving his kind of sordid family back on the reservation. He comes back, and he has to deal with the sickness in his mind, which is just death, basically. And he has to deal with not being an all-American man anymore. And all of his friends have gone to drinking, which, you know, I support full heart, you know.
Oh, yes, but not to the extent that his friends do. Surely not.
And they call it self-medication throughout the whole book because they really think they're helping themselves.
Yeah.
And Tayo's the only one who sits with them while they're drinking and begins to cry or stabs them in the belly because he realizes that the liquor's not going to help them.
Yep.
You know, that's not going to help them get over it. And he doesn't hate the Japanese. They were in the Philippines, and what happens? The narrative of the story is he prays for the rain to stop because the humidity is infecting Rocky's wounds, which is his adoptive brother. And so he says he wants the rain to stop so Rocky will recover and the dry air will heal him. When he comes back to the reservation, there's a 6-year drought, and so he feels responsible that prayer kind of carried over.
Yeah.
And there's a sense that because he also did a rain dance before he ever left to go to war, so he feels connected to nature, that if he prays for it, there's a good chance it will happen. So if the bad thing happens, he feels responsible for it. So the whole book, he's trying to figure out how to cure the sickness in his mind, and the sickness is tied to the drought. He feels that if he's
and it's
cured
certainly tied to the war as well, right? I mean, that's terrible shell shock. As you say, post-traumatic syndrome is certainly operating here, too. I'm not saying that you're not right, but this poor dear is dealing with a lot, you know.
And he lost his uncle, who was the man who kind of raised him. And one thing I like about the book, besides the fact that it reads like a movie. Like, I was playing a movie in my head. Because you have flashbacks of, I counted 5 different scenes. That are told, or 5 different periods that are told throughout the book, not including the little poetry he's got.
Right.
But the duality between being half white and half Indian, I'm half white and half Indian.
Oh, you are?
From India. Real Indian, not Native American.
I see.
But the problems are exactly the same. The sense of being an ethnic orphan.
Yeah.
You know,
very interesting.
Me and my brother and my sister have those, you know, complexes, if that's what you want to call them.
I see. Yeah, you're both and neither somehow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so the way he deals with it and the way he comes to terms with it, and at the very end, how instead of killing Emo to save Harley, he feels that that action would be a white action. So the Native American action would be to stand back and let the evil kind of devour itself.
Yeah, very interesting.
And so
right.
he's able to separate that, and just the way the town treats him and the way his own family treat him, he's the little sister's son. And I like the way he and Rocky bonded. I mean, the character development is just amazing in this book that I haven't found in any of the other books.
Yeah, you know, we are getting more and more psychological as we go along through the semester. This is really, except for those amazing times, which are amazing exceptions, it's quite a realistic novel. You know, we hear the rain fall and we feel the characters' feelings in ways that we probably haven't because of the more mythic elements. So we're getting a little more toward the realistic end, except for these amazing interpolations of trickster tales, which we're going to look at.
And that's the only thing that's magical about it, because
that Tesh scene, isn't it?
Yeah, because it takes this little companion poem and inserts it into the narrative, so they're connected. And otherwise, like, I couldn't see the connection. It was just kind of like his background story, why he does things. When I found out that the woman he spent the summer with is the same woman that his ancestors saw as Mother Nature, that kind of united the two.
Yeah, I mean, both of you have gone to the same essential passage. I think you're thinking, it is when Batoni, the medicine man, tells him to go find, he's looking for the cattle. That's the scene you're talking about, right, both of you?
Yeah, but afterwards Batoni tells him that she was, however you want to pronounce it. I thought that's what he told her.
Yeah.
Tayo.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're going to look at all that development, but thank you. So if you haven't gotten to all of those parts yet, now Brent has filled it in a little bit. The overarching narrative here I don't know if you know about psychoanalysis at all or if you're interested, but I mean, even therapy as generally practiced by family and therapists or whatever, there's a kind of arc, isn't there? There's that's similar. There's a kind of a process of healing that goes on in this novel. So the plot that Brent's described very nicely seems to me, we could say something like this is a book about a character, Tayo's reestablishing his health, his mental health, through participation in the creative act of storytelling, ritual acting out of a story in a ceremony, which is the title of the book. Where's the ceremony? There's going to be this notion of participating in a ritual. We speak of ceremony in a wedding ceremony or whatever, with this particular notion of a repeated ritual pattern that has mythic or, if you want, sacred religious significance. So this ceremony that is the subject of this book is a kind of, in other terms, we could speak of it as a psychoanalytic process where he goes deep down into his soul in this central scene that we're going to talk about and comes back out healed. Yeah, Brent?
Kind of a question.
Yeah.
Were the white people, they talk about the destroyers, and the white destroyers are the result of the Indians turning away from their faith, just like in the poem. They started practicing magic, and they weren't listening to their goddess anymore. Was that just my interpretation, or is that what they were saying?
I want to go through all of those, or try to trace those fragments. But yeah, there's something self-critical about this. It's not just like them and us, and it's not just like the white people did us in. It's that we had a cultural amnesia, and that does come out in some of the fragments of this, let's call it poem, that is interpolated throughout the text, which I'm going to study up and give you a little bit more information on, but I want to follow some of them. in a minute. But first I want to say some more general things about the novel. So, I mean, you can think about this kind of process in psychoanalytic terms, in cultural terms, which are the ones proposed in the novel, or you could think about it in religious terms. There's something about a conversion experience, or if if you're born again, or you convert to a religious faith, there's something there too that's like a spiritual journey, presumably. So I think there are certain analogs that might be useful for us in thinking about this. The catalyst, or the therapist, or the priest, however you're thinking about it, the catalyst for the action in the novel, which is the cure of this young man, is Betoni, old man Betoni, B-E-T-O-N-I-E, the Navajo curer or medicine man. And I think Leslie Silko, who's a she, by the way, I think maybe you said he, yeah. We should talk a little bit more about the other works that she's written. She's brilliant, I think, in showing how contemporary indigenous culture has to evolve. So the medicine man, when we first meet him, when Tayo goes to consult him, he seems like a bag man, right? Or a homeless person. He's in this place with all this stuff, of the detritus of contemporary American culture, Coke bottles and so forth, and you think, ooh. And then what we are given to understand is, well, this is a contemporary medicine man. He's not dancing with feathers and loincloth or whatever horrible stereotype we might have, but that doesn't mean he's not very, very powerful, and he's the one who unleashes this ceremony that's curative. Kevin, were you going to say something? No. So we have this pattern, and there's lots of talk about pattern. The word pattern comes up all the time in the novel. Whether it's a mountain or a particular constellation of stars, there's certain cattle that are talked about in terms of a pattern, a woman, and so forth. So we're going to look at that too. But this ceremony seems to have something to do with uncovering or recovering patterns that make sense. Patterns of culture that can be understood by this character that have been lost. And I think, Brent, you're absolutely right that this cultural amnesia is really the subtext of, and how to recover. How do you recover? You go to some man who doesn't look like any fancy medicine man at all, but is known in the community for his powers and so forth. So how to recover what you've lost. And sometimes, again, just to use the psychoanalytic metaphor, sometimes recovering lost memories or things that have been repressed by the psyche, that's part of the process of cure, the talking cure, as Freud called it. Not that I'm a great proponent of that, but the pattern is so, the arc, as I say, the structure of the story is so similar to a psychoanalytic going down into the psyche and coming back up with something that helps. Okay, so let's see. The ceremony, and we're going to look at the pages in a minute, but the ceremony, just to say some general things about it, remember that he's sent to search for Uncle Josiah's half-breed cattle. Have you all gotten there yet? So this sounds... That's what I have to look up. Hang on. I think it's something... Can you help me with it? We meet Betoni... I think it's 138 to... Yeah, go to 138. The ceremony starts, really, we get a very long central section of the poem, but if you look at the paragraph that begins at 3/4 of the way down on 138, we get this beginning of this search. They left on horseback before dawn. Are you there? The old man rode a skinny pinto mare with hip bones and ribs poking against the hide like springs of an old car seat. You see, this is the realism. This is a mythic journey, but we hear about springs of an old car seat. Quite the opposite of Nanapush, where he talks in very natural terms. Notice the nature of the metaphors in this novel. They're very different from the last one we've read, even though both authors are trying to approximate, or trying to, not approximate, to approach a sense of what remains of indigenous American culture. So we get the ribs like the springs of an old car seat. But she was strong and moved nimbly up the narrow rocky path north of Batoni's Hogan. The old man's helper rode, and we're not going to read it all, but up at the top, let's just skim this by skipping from paragraph to paragraph. We'll have the second night here, Batoni said, indicating a stone Hogan. Tayo sat near the horses, looking down the path over the way they had come. Skip along. We're going to skip for the moment the poetic interpolations. Go to the bottom of 141. Now this is something that sounds familiar to me. I certainly don't know Laguna Pueblo Indian culture, Southwest Indian culture, but these sand paintings are something I've seen, and maybe you have as well. He sat in the center of the white corn sand painting. The rainbows crossed were in the painting behind him. Batoni's helper scraped the sand away and buried the bottoms of the hoops in little trenches, and so forth. Now we're going to keep skipping along here. Go to the next paragraph, top of 142. The helper worked in the shadows beyond the dark mountain range. He worked with the black sand. That is the mountain range in the sand painting, right? We're looking at them create this, what would be like an astrology chart, to go to yet another metaphor, or another analogous matter, charting the universe in that sense, charting the stars. The helper worked so then Batoni gave him a basket with prayer sticks to hold. And then we assumed that the following passage, which we're not going to read at the moment, is what Batoni says. And it's about a dark journey, isn't it? Well, let's read it. First, the cries, which I will not try to do. And then it follows page 142, the middle, the indented passages. In dangerous places you traveled, in danger you traveled, to a dangerous place you traveled, in danger, i.e., to the place where whirling darkness started its journey, along the edges of the rocks, along the places of the gentle wind, along the edges of blue clouds, along the edges of clear water. Whirling darkness came up from the north. Whirling darkness moved along to the east. It came along the south. It arrived in the west. Whirling darkness spiraled downward, and it came up in the middle. So here now the language goes toward nature, doesn't it? It's no longer broken car springs here. This is the incantation that Batoni is starting Tayo on his mythic journey with. Right? Anybody want to interpolate or add, please do so. So we see the helper at the bottom of 142. Go up to the top of 143, 3 lines down. The old man came forward then and cut Tayo across the top of his head. It happened suddenly. He hadn't expected it, but the dark flint was sharp and the cut was short. They both reached for him then. Lifting him up by the shoulders, they guided his feet into the bare footprints, and Batoni prayed him through each of the 5 hoops. Tayo could feel the blood ooze along his scalp, and so forth. So we get this ritual initiation, practically. Keep going up to top of 145. See, these are long. This is a long beginning of a ceremony that's going to continue. Top of 145. He dreamed about the speckled cattle. See, this is Uncle Josiah's cattle that we're after here. It seems we're going to say why. We're going to think about why these cattle, this mythic journey. A reconnection of all sorts, I think, to the family, to the tribal practice, to the land. He dreamed about the speckled cattle. They had seen him and they were scattering between juniper trees. Now he's dreaming this, you see. This is part of an internal thing. We could make the mistake that he's out riding, lassoing cattle, but that is not what he's doing. He's dreaming them. Then, next paragraph, he woke up and he was shivering. He stood up to find the blanket covering him. Go down to the next paragraph. He heard someone come up from the west side of the ridge. He turned. Bettoni looked even taller in the darkness. He motioned for Tayo to sit down. He sat down next to him and reached into his shirt pocket for the tobacco and wheat papers. He rolled a thin cigarette. Skipped down to the next paragraph. It all started a long time ago. My father, Deschini, was an old man then. The hunters were returning from the South Peak. This starts to sound a bit now like Nanapush. This memory of the world that was. They'd been hunting deer and drying the meat for 2 months. Their burros were loaded with sacks full of jerky and bundles of stiff, dry hides. The Navajos were careful. They didn't want any trouble, and so forth. Keep going. Middle paragraph of 146. The old men were unconcerned. It's still part of Bettoni's narrative. They sat whittling toothpicks from pinon twigs. They knew how it would feel to let the horses run through the cool air. They had been traveling slowly in the dust and so forth. Keep going down below. The stars gave off a special light, more subtle and luminous than moonlight. The riders could make out the density of the trees and the massive boundaries, and so forth. So this is long, keep going. There's something about a blue lace shawl that I want you to notice. That is, it's the second to last sentence of the first full paragraph, 147. It was a blue lace shawl. The others walked over and they stood together and looked up into the branches of the big tree. They boosted a man up to the big branch to bring her down. Bring her down. Suddenly it's her, not just the shawl. He moved toward her cautiously, expecting her to fight, but she came down on her own, dropping softly into the dry needles under the tree. She did not cry like captives did, or jabber in her own language with tears running down her face. She held her mouth tight, teeth clenched under her thin lips, and she stared at them with hazel green eyes. This is going to be this female principle somehow that we're not sure, we don't know much about her. Keep going down one more paragraph. They tied her to a small tree in the clearing where they could see her. Keep going. Early the next morning, page 148, they rode into the Chusca Mountains, and so forth. Okay, so this is hard to teach because it's a very long process that we're going to be following here. Does anybody have the next passages marked, or Brent, can you walk us through, or Richard, both of you who like this novel, walk us through some more here? What's going on here? Or what continues to go on here?
I was actually wondering when they talk about the hazel green eyes, the cantina dancer, what was her name?
Yeah.
She had hazel green eyes also.
Yeah.
And something else. But actually, could I say something about the guy's assistant?
Yes.
Right before.
Well, you have to push your button. I'm so sorry. You have to need extra hands.
Right before where we just started, on page 128.
Okay.
It tells the story, like this little kid like comes out from the shadows and drops the wood down.
Yeah.
And then they tell the story about this child that wanders off beyond where people can go into the cave of bears. And the part that I actually thought was pretty significant about this, it seems very analogous to Tayo's situation. It says
where are we? 128?
Actually, it's on 130 now. The story of the kid starts on 128.
Okay, thank you.
But the part I thought was significant was on 130.
Yeah.
The second paragraph, it says they couldn't just grab the child. They couldn't simply take him back because he would be in between forever and probably he would die. And that seems pretty analogous to the situation Tayo is in the ceremony that he has to go through to get back to his Indian roots, especially.
Yes, and keep reading, just so that. Thank you. That's very interesting. Some of the interpolated poems serve different functions at different points, and this one is it really does continue the narrative. It's not just a counter narrative. So just read or if I will, if you want, but just keep reading there. They couldn't just grab the child. Then what? That's second paragraph of the indented text. Yeah.
They couldn't just grab the child. They couldn't simply take him back because he would be in between forever and probably he would die. They had to call him step by step. The medicine man brought the child back. So, long time ago, they got him back again, but he wasn't quite the same after that, not like the other children.
Very nice, yeah. So you're pointing out the significance of this helper who understands Tayo's situation, let's say, or parallels it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Tayo wasn't exactly in a den of bears or anything, but the Rocky, his brother,
Yeah.
his cousin, really, I guess. He's supposed to admire, like, his family and the society around them admires this guy, and he's supposed to want to achieve and be like Rocky. He's supposed to be a role model, but Rocky denies everything about the culture that is around him.
Right.
He's in total denial and embraces the white man's culture.
Yeah. Is there any one of Tayo's friends that doesn't embrace the white culture? I mean, do we see, other than Bettoni, and of course some of the older generation hope he'll figure out what's wrong, but all of the youth in this novel
Yeah,
are...
all of his peers reject
Yeah.
their indigenous heritage.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Brent, you were going to say something?
Well, they talk about the importance of the eyes on page 99 at the bottom.
Thank you.
and the
Oh,
top
I
of
just
100.
love it when you have your page numbers all ready. Thank you. This is
They
great.
just say that
Bottom of 99, let us get there. Okay, tell us. Yes, of course.
Tayo
it's-
talks about how he always wanted dark eyes, and they made fun of him for having hazel-colored eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And then what's her name? Night Swan tells him that the color of his eyes show change in the world. And the funny thing is, the three people who bring about change in the book are all three. They're not homogenous. Tayo's half white, half Indian, and Bettoni is kind of he's the shaman, but for the white section, kind of.
Yeah.
And then the swan dancer is the outsider.
Yeah.
And all three of them are the ones that actually initiate the changes that take place in the narrative.
Yeah, see, that is right. I had said Bettoni is the prime mover here, but there are certainly other players too.
But all three of them have that in common. They have the fact that they're on the fringe of
That's right.
on both worlds. And
Yeah.
if I'm right about the whole devastation of the landscape being caused by the Indians, then it would have to be someone who was part of both worlds to solve this.
Yeah, that's very
It's
interesting.
almost like a Christ-like comparison, because if an Indian couldn't do it because the Indians caused it, and a white person couldn't do it because the whites are the result. So it
Yeah,
has to be something in between.
right.
And it can't be someone in the reservation who helps cure Tayo. It has to be a stranger from outside, which happens to be that prostitute. And
Yeah.
it can't be the shaman who comes to, help them the first time that Auntie sends. It has to be another outsider. So it's these people who are kind of on the fringe,
Yeah.
who share both things, who are the only ones who are able to affect what really goes on.
Yeah, that's a very good observation. Yes, if you're sort of deep in the heart of one territory or another, you're blinded to the other territory. It's got to be someone who's a kind of, if not go-between, at least someone who has a perspective that isn't monofocal. It's bifocal. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. That's a very good point. We should read that part about the eyes. But yeah, Tracy, are you going to
Just to
elaborate
say something to
here?
go along with that,
Yeah.
the couple, and I'm not sure if they were actually, I guess the woman who comes at the end who stays with him,
Yeah.
stays with Tayo at the end, they both, when he sees the hunter in the woods, when he's getting the cattle toward the end,
Yeah.
he sings in different Indian languages. I mean, and he sings songs from Laguna, he sings
Yeah.
songs from all kinds of places. He does the same thing, that mixing. It might not be a white and Indian mixing, but it's all the Indian culture mixing.
Yeah, that's a great display.
The Laguna song he's singing is the same one that Bettoni. Is that how you sing it?
Bettoni? I don't know.
It's
That's
the
how I
same
say it.
song that Bettoni was singing at one point.
Oh, good eye. Yeah, very good eye.
On page
Yeah.
246, it explains
On page which?
246
Okay.
at the bottom of the first paragraph. Well, actually, the whole top paragraph.
Hang on, we're getting there. Don't start yet. Okay, 246. The whole paragraph.
Explains the lack of boundaries and why everything is like their whole legend. And it's the starting of the destroyers. How they all used to be one people, then they all got separated. Now they're all united again. And that's one of the reasons why Tayo doesn't really hate the Japanese, because he sees the connection in everything. It's like the circle of life in The Lion King or something.
Yeah.
He can see all that, and that's why I think he's able to do all these
Language.
transitional things across these borders that no one else can pass.
Yeah. Let's look at that since we're there. You're so right. I was saying something about pattern. We see the word pattern a lot. We also see this notion of, which we've talked about plenty, for example, in the Kingdom of This World, about merging cultures and disparate cultures, or let's say cultural contact, whether it's collision or convergence, modification or destruction. I mean, there are lots of possible outcomes to cultural contact. And when the West contacts indigenous cultures, we know what one of the very probable outcomes is, at least in North America. But look, it's that paragraph which is so important. These last few pages, it really is a very interesting novel structurally too, because we get these blocks of text. It becomes discontinuous and very conclusory. There are lots of kind of concluding moments in the last, say, 10, 12 pages of the novel. But look at the bottom of 245, since Brent has brought us here. Let's just look at it. And Tracy, too, with your good comment about all these languages. We see that Tayo is being cured, or has been. I mean, we see a kind of, it's as if, again, that notion of the crescendo of the orchestra, and it's sort of like the end of the movie is coming. He had been so close to it, caught up in it for so long that its simplicity struck him deep in the chest. Trinity site where they exploded the first atomic bomb was only 300 miles to the south at White Sands. And the top secret laboratories where the bomb had been created were deep in the Jemez Mountains, on land that government took from Cochiti Pueblo. Los Alamos, only 100 miles northeast of him now, still surrounded by high electric fences, and the ponderosa pine and tawny sand rock of the Jemez Mountains, Mountain Canyon, where the shrine of the twin mountain lions had always been. You see, there's in the one sentence we see the Los Alamos testing ground for the nuclear bomb and the shrine of the twin mountain lions. There was no end to it. It knew no boundaries. The witchery, remember the word that means white evil, or Western, European. And he had arrived at the point of convergence, where the fate of all living things and even the earth had been laid. From the jungles of his dreaming, he recognized why the Japanese voices had merged with Laguna voices, and Josiah's voice and Rocky's voice. The lines of culture and worlds were drawn in flat, dark lines in fine, light sand, converging in the middle of witchery's final ceremonial sand painting. From that time on, human beings were one clan again, united by the fate the destroyers planned for all of them, for all living things, united by a circle of death that devoured people in cities 12,000 miles away, victims who had never known these mesas, who had never seen the delicate colors of the rocks which boiled up their slaughter. So here, unity, but not unity. I mean, it's both good and bad. She's very good at keeping us away from the binary, oh, he's cured, he's not. This is unity of death, he's saying, that the white witchery, the destroyers have united everyone in their power. But at the same time, we get that line, why the Japanese voices had merged with Laguna voices and Josiah's voice and Rocky's voice. There's something not altogether negative about this either, but still pretty negative. Brent, you want to take us through, since we've just gone right straight to the end of the novel, you want to take us through the rest of it, what goes on here? Do you have other underlined passages here? I want to go back to the eyes,
could I
too.
just say something first?
Yeah, please. Oh, it's great to have two experts on this novel.
It's just interesting that she would one moment talk about how humanity was one clan again, and then in the next paragraph she even italicizes the word they when he otherizes the white people.
Okay, very nice. Let's go down to that paragraph. He walked to the mine shaft and so forth. Go down to the last paragraph there. I mean, the last sentence of that following paragraph on 246. But they had taken these beautiful rocks from deep within the earth, and they had laid them in a monstrous design. See that design business? Realizing destruction on a scale only they could have dreamed. Yeah. Now tell me how you read that they, or just to make sure that we understand.
I read that as the destroyers, which would be the white people.
Yeah.
And maybe, as Brent would say, which is spawned from when the Indians took a wrong turn.
Right, yeah. See, but we don't want to over-blame the Indians. What we aren't going to do is under-blame them either. I mean, I don't think she's saying that the indigenous peoples ruined their own land, but they were complicit. I think she's saying we can't just blame the they or the them.
No, what I think it is, the Indians give the white people power over them.
Well, she
I
has
think that
suggested.
she's saying that they lose their identity. They let themselves lose their identity. You know, they kind of give in to this self-defeated mentality, and that's why things ended up the way they did.
Yeah.
Not that one's necessarily the result of the other, but they have an identity. They can still be Indian. They can still fight, but they forgot how.
But yeah, that, and also that the destroyers, the witchery of European culture is very powerful too. But you're so right in your point, because precisely we see the young people who are Tayo's peers giving in, and then we can say, well, it's not their fault really. What else is there? But she's making a point here that's complicated. If it were just about the white usurpation of the land, which it is, and if it were just about the white creation of the atom bomb, which it also is, it might not be as rich. This is a novel for indigenous people to read and think about recuperating their cultures, as well as us white people, me, white person, feeling, yikes, look what we've done, you see. So yeah, it's both. I think you're right to emphasize that duality there, and that is what makes possible, as I think you both said, and Tracy as well, it makes possible some kind of convergence of cultures at the end, where Tayo can speak various languages, and where as you said, he doesn't blame the Japanese on some level at all. Voices merge. Okay, so let's just keep going here. Now, some of you won't have gotten here, but this is the end of the mythic journey. This is why we have to pay attention to the issue of ceremony, of ritual, of pattern, of design. A ceremony isn't a ceremony if it doesn't have a certain order, a certain ritual content. Now, that's not quite fair. But I'm thinking of I'm thinking of the sacraments of Christianity, which most of us are familiar with. The wedding, the certain aspects of the wedding ceremony, and obviously couples depart from the standard text, and there's certainly still a ceremony. They're still married and so forth. But nonetheless, this book, I think, is very concerned with the notion of ceremony as something that's grounded in history, that it takes you back. It's not like it may take you forward too, but grounded in history, therefore repeating, and repetitive, therefore ritual. Okay, let's just keep going here toward the end. Brent, other places you want to point out here at the end of the novel, or shall we just...
I don't know what the page number is, but when he decides to let them kill Harley.
Yeah, it's here just toward the end. Let's look at it. It's 251. Well, Emo's still there. Yeah, this is horrible. 253. It's right here.
Yeah. And he talks about how he wants to avenge Harley, but by doing that, he becomes a destroyer.
Yeah.
So there has to be a sacrifice, and that's another thing that the novel puts out there. Something has to be sacrificed, and they do that in the poem also.
Yeah.
I think it's the dragonfly and the buzzard or something.
Yeah.
Talk about how the people have to put something in a jar and send it to the fourth world or something.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I forgot.
There's the fact that you have to sacrifice something to regain what you've lost.
Yeah.
And that's where I think Tayo's able to understand his ethnic binary, and he comes to terms with it, because he realizes that he has to choose a side, and he chooses his Native American.
Yeah, it is pretty interesting. Look at 252 and 253. It comes as a surprise. We would expect this young man back from the war to step in and keep his friends from killing each other, after all. Look at the bottom of 252. So it's a bit of a surprise, this rather violent moment, and I think absolutely, as Brent's saying, we have to read it mythically. We have to read it as a symbolic and self-conscious gesture. Look 3 paragraphs up from the bottom of 252. Sorry for those of you that aren't there yet, but hey, you'll get there by Thursday. So, he knew he could get to Emo before Pinky or Leroy could stop him. They were drunk. Emo's words were thick and slurred. Pinky had stumbled to his knees beside Leroy, squatting next to the fire. What a bunch of drunks. Gosh, you feel, it's just so pathetic. They're so... Anyway, he visualized the contours of Emo's skull, the GI haircut, exposed thin bone at the temples, bones that would flex slightly before it gave way under the thrust of the steel edge. He imagines it. The wind came suddenly, fanned the coals into yellow flames. Leroy jumped back and stumbled hard against Pinky. Pinky flushed him away and Leroy fell. You fucking queer, Leroy kicked sand in his face and Pinky lunged at him. Emo stood close. The fat under his chin was wrinkled with his grinning. The fire's reflection made... I mean, this is as realistic as we're going to get in any of our novels. There's nothing mythic here. I mean, the description is really lurid, let's say. The fire's reflection made two flashing yellow eyes on Emo's glasses. The wind was moving clouds rapidly across the sky, and as they crossed over the moon, the darkness and light rolled back and forth like the men wrestling on the ground. The sand their feet kicked loose made a swirling trail in the wind. One more. The wind made his sweat go cold. This was the time, but his fingers were numb and he fumbled with the screwdriver as he tried to rub warmth back into his hands. There would be no one to help Emo, but Tayo stayed on his knees in the shadows. Leroy had a knee on Pinky's throat and he could hear raspy, choking sounds. Emo was laughing loudly, pointing at the body hanging stiffly, swaying a little in the gusts of wind, and pointing at Leroy kneeling on Pinky's throat, and so forth. We can't keep on reading the whole thing, but we get this violent scene at the end. It unfolds here, and then Brent, were you referring to the final? Where were you?
There's a line right there that said, "He would have been another victim, a drunk Indian war veteran settling on an old feud." And the army doctors would say that the indications of this end have been there all along. So that's.
Right, they do it here. We don't quite see the act. It's done. It's sort of in the white space between those two paragraphs. But you were referring to the poem. There was a poem about the dragonfly, and they have to put things in a jar. Is that where is that?
That's way in the beginning.
Earlier. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's what I thought.
First 100 pages.
Yeah. Since we're here, let's keep going. Although I didn't want to take you through the. Yeah. Maybe I'm going to leave the rest of the end, and let's look at some of the poetic fragments, because the real challenge of this book, structurally speaking, is to see how this, as I say, interpolated, that means interwoven narrative of what seems to be indigenous origin, and probably is, though certainly very worked, how it supports the text. It does so, I mean, the regular text, the prose narration. It does so in a number of ways. Here's what I'm going to propose to you, and then we'll see how much time we have to trace them. The first three installments of the tale, we can call it the inserted tale, that runs throughout the book, are why there is no rain. Remember, it's concerned. It happens to be. I have the pages written down, but let's just look at page 13, and we'll see. Well, no, we need to look at the very beginning. I guess maybe that is page 13. No. Let's look at the very beginning. We have this invocation to ceremony. So we have 4 pages at the beginning of the novel that are not standard novelistic narrative, correct? And we get this person whose name I can't pronounce either, and I don't think I'll even try. Tsitsnako, thought woman, is sitting in her room, and whatever she thinks about appears. So I think this is Leslie Silko referring to herself, the novelist. She thought of her sisters, and together they created the universe, this world, and the 4 worlds below. Thought woman, the spider, named things, and as she named them, they appeared. She is sitting in her room thinking of a story now. I'm telling you the story she's thinking. So it's as if the narrator and the author are one, and then they split. I'm telling you the story she's thinking. The narrator says, I'm going to tell you the story that the author is thinking. Pretty magical there, hard to do. Keep going to page 2, ceremony. I'll tell you something about stories, he said. They aren't just entertainment. Don't be fooled. They are all we have, you see. Does that remind you of tracks? The importance and the privileging of oral narrative in a culture that documents its history with paper and ink and in triplicate. All we have are the stories, don't be fooled. Because they're all we have, you see. all we have to fight off illness and death. You don't have anything if you don't have the stories. Their evil is mighty, but they can't stand up to our stories. We know who the they is already. So they try to destroy the stories. Let the stories be confused or forgotten. They would like that. They would be happy. They, those others, the white Western culture, because we would be defenseless then. He rubbed his belly. I keep them here, he said. Here, put your hand on it. See, it's moving. There's life here for the people. And in the belly of this story, the rituals and the ceremony are still growing. Then page 3, what she said. The only cure I know is a good ceremony. That's what she said. And then we have sunrise. So it's a very elliptical, very mysterious, in a way, beginning to this novel. But then go to page 13. Excuse me, I didn't do attendance. I want to do that. Tracy, can I hand that to you? Thanks. Look at page 13. I believe that's the first of these first 3 installments, if you want, that run through the book. I have, if you want to note pages, and we can, all you have to do is flip through your book, but it's pages 13, 37, 46, and page 53 that all deal with the drought. And Brent's already brought this issue up. It's important for Tayo because Tayo, in some sense, feels guilty for having brought it on. But what we could also say, we know as readers, is that it's a spiritual drought. It's a cultural drought. That is, things aren't working at the outset of this book. Now the third, let's see. The third begins, I don't know exactly how I'm calling the installments, but on page 57, we start to get fragments, but let's see where. Hang on. Fragments that describe a journey and fragments that parallel Tayo's problems. So look, for example, at page 57. I mean, we can try to, and in fact, one of my students, when I taught this novel before, that was her topic, to look at how, go through, chart the mythic embedded story and see how you chart it. But look at the bottom of page 50. Well, 53 there, we're still in the rain. Look at 57. We start to get another series, which seems to me to be about the journey. This is very interesting. The one on 57, because it's not mythic in any normal sense. It's as Bitoni, the kind of homeless fellow or seemingly homeless fellow, doesn't seem like your normal shaman somehow. So here we have an embedded narrative that's a contemporary narrative of obviously Tayo and his friends. We went to this bar on 4th Avenue, see, me and O'Shea, this crazy Irishman. We had a few drinks, then I saw these 2 white women sitting all alone. One was kind of fat, she had dark hair, but this other one, man, she had big tits and real blonde hair, I said to him, and so forth. So we get this very modern kind of, or very contemporary interpolated narrative, but this is what's going to start us, this one, I say, is a kind of turning point between the mythic drought narrative and now the journey of Tayo's problematic life. If you skip to the next one, which is page 71, again, we get this kind of consideration of Tayo's situation. Look at the sentence that just precedes the poetic passages. That day in the storeroom, when he asked how his mother had looked before he was born, was the closest he'd ever come to mentioning the picture. This is a picture of his mother. So that's where our mother went. How can we get down there? Hummingbird looked at the skinny people. He felt sorry for them. He said, you need a messenger. Listen, I'll tell you what to do. And see, this is where now, it seems to me, the mythic journey begins. These are the things you have to bring with you. Bring a beautiful pottery jar painted with parrots and big flowers. Mix black mountain dirt, some sweet corn flour, and a little water. Cover the jar with a new buckskin and say this over the jar. And sing this softly above the jar. After 4 days you will be alive. 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 And then we go back to the Army recruiter. Go to page 82. We're going to follow this segment here. This is kind of preparation for the journey that we see them undertake when we started to look at about page 128 or so. This is on the fourth day. On the fourth day you'll be alive. On the fourth day you'll be alive. We just repeated that. Now we're here, 10 pages later. On the fourth day something buzzed around inside the jar. They lifted the buckskin, and a big green fly with yellow feelers on his head flew out of the jar. Fly will go with me, Hummingbird said. We'll go see what she wants. They flew to the fourth world below. Down there was another kind of daylight. Everything was blooming and growing. Everything was so beautiful. I'm sure that there are articles written about the ways in which these passages embody Laguna Pueblo indigenous belief systems. The fourth world, I don't know what it is. I'm sure it's... Does anybody know? I'll look into this, but that would be something. For most readers, we aren't going to run and do that kind of research, but here what we're starting to see is something's taking a bit of life, right? You're going to take these things on this journey. Now we're seeing what's happened. Now go to page 105. See what we can do with that. That's the next piece of poetry, if you want. Fly started sucking on sweet things, so Hummingbird had to tell him to wait. Wait until we see our mother. They found her. They gave her blue pollen and yellow pollen and gave her turquoise beads. They gave her prayer sticks. I suppose you want something, she said. Yes, we want food and storm clouds. You and Old Buzzard to purify your town first. You get Old Buzzard to purify your town first, and then maybe I will send you people food and rain again. Fly and Hummingbird flew back up. They told the town people that Old Buzzard had to purify the town. Okay, keep going. This is not so interesting, but we're just going to do it. 113 is the next. It is almost, to make sense of some of these passages, you have to skip, because you forget what's going on in the short poetic passages. 113. So we're still now, Fly and Hummingbird are working on the problem of regenerating the culture, or re-enlivening, revivifying, curing, healing. They took more pollen, more beads, and more prayer sticks, and they went to see Old Buzzard. They arrived at his place in the east. Who's out there? Nobody ever came here before. It's us, Hummingbird and Fly. Oh, what do you want? We need you to purify our town. Well, look here, your offering isn't complete. Where's the tobacco? You see, it wasn't easy. Fly and Hummingbird had to fly back to town again. Go to page 128. This is right about now. In fact, 128 really is where this Tayo's journey begins, though. And this now is the helper part that Richard's already pointed out to us. He was a small child learning to get around by himself, bottom of 128. His family went by wagon into the mountains near Fluted Rock. It was fall and they were picking piñones. I guess he just wandered away, trying to follow his brothers and sisters into the trees. His aunt thought he was with his mother, and she thought he was with her sister. When they tracked him the next day, his tracks went into the canyon near the place which belonged to the bears. They went as far as they could to the place where no human could go beyond, and his little footprints were mixed with the bear tracks, another echo of tracks. So they sent word for this medicine man to come. He knew how to call the child back again. There wasn't much time. The medicine man was running and his assistants followed him behind him. They all wore bear weed tied at their wrists and ankles and around their necks. He grunted loudly and scratched on the ground. I'll just keep going. On the ground in front of him. He kept watching the entrance of the bear cave. He grunted and made a low growling sound. This is the medicine man, trying to get this little boy back from the bear. Pretty soon the little bears came out because he was making mother bear sounds. He grunted and growled a little more, and then the child came out. He was already walking like his sisters. He was already crawling on the ground. He couldn't just grab the child. He couldn't take him back. And then the part that we just seen that Richard read to us. So this, all of this is, getting ready for a journey that will change your shape. It's like metamorphosis. We've talked about that, especially with the kingdom of this world. Remember how T. Noel can change shapes anytime he wants. That is, he can become a goose or he can become a fly, as I believe he does. We're seeing that kind of metamorphic belief system. The belief system where the human being isn't just one thing. Yeah, Chris, right?
I'm thinking about the synthesis between the verse vignettes and the actual novel. And it dawned on me when I read the passage, the vignette on page 257.
Okay, let's look at it.
Which is like some of the final of the ceremony, like the celebration of the success of the ceremony.
Exactly.
Amu'u, you say you have seen her. I'm guessing that's Tayo. Last winter up north.
You're guessing that it's Tayo speaking. Is that what you're saying? Or
no, Amu'u would actually.
That's the woman.
Oh, that's the woman.
Yeah, okay.
That's the woman's name. Okay.
Yeah.
But this is you. The you is Tayo.
Yeah.
That he has seen her last winter up north with Mountain Lion, both on the hill when he was kidnapped by the cowboys.
Yeah.
And also whenever he saw the hunter in her lodge.
Yeah.
And the hunter. All summer she was south near Aku, where the cows were, and started crying. The old men started crying. Amu, Amu, you have seen her. We'll be blessed again.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
So I'm thinking that she is actually the spirit encanted by the ceremony to heal him.
Yeah.
And when I went back to the passage and saw Robert never saw her. Never saw any interaction there. He saw the place, but he never saw her.
Right.
And she is kept separately from the physical world.
Yeah. So it's a kind of life principle, a kind of female principle of, rebirth in this case, or healing. Yeah, very interesting. Thank you. And what we're going to see in the very end, now we keep skipping around, but at the very end we're going to see that Tayo is going to become the shaman. He's going to become the medicine man. He's now able, having been healed, able to heal others. So there's indication of that. Yeah, Norma?
Very quickly, in the beginning of the story on page 33, when Tayo's grandmother realizes that he needs a medicine man, she holds him and kind of rocks him and says her name as well, Amu, Amu, over and over again. So maybe she's thinking that really she's the only one that can help him.
Yeah, thank you. Now, and who do you take that she to be, that kind of female spirit principle of reconnection? Yes, thank you very much for that page reference. On page 33, we see this name for the first time. I believe it's the first time at the bottom of the first long paragraph. So it says she knows what he finally learns, in a sense, isn't it? She knows that this is what he's going to have to recuperate, in a sense. Yeah. I wanted to go just to finish this. Well, let's see, we have just a couple of minutes. The long sort of heart of things, at least of the interpolated poetic passages, begins on 133. We saw the one 128, which is about the boy in the bear's cave and the boy in between, as Richard pointed out. We don't have time to look in detail at 133 through 138. There's a 5-page narrative. It is a temptation to skip these sometimes. Don't please give in to that temptation, but it is an interruption in the plot, and when you get into what's happening in the realistic plot that is in which these mythic tales are embedded, sometimes it's diverting in an annoying way, but the novel is definitely meant to be read continuously. This is what I call a conquest narrative. Here we really do see the witchery of the Europeans and the white people. So there's no question that she's not Leslie Silko is not letting Europeans off the hook, but even though not also letting the indigenous peoples. But do just read through this, and if you want to put in your, we can look at it in more detail next time, but if you want to put on in your margin conquest narrative, that's exactly what it is. It's how things changed when the Europeans arrived, changed disastrously. For the worse, they will bring terrible diseases the people have never known. Entire tribes will dry out, covered with festered sores, shitting blood, vomiting blood, corpses for our work, and so forth. There's no punches pulled in this middle passage. And right after that is where I date the beginning of the journey, 138. They left on horseback before dawn. So it's really a very interestingly structured novel. Leslie Silko had the great idea to put those mythic narratives in a typographic form that sets them off completely from the prose realistic narration. I think that's we have to slow down our reading when we come to them. We say, ooh, I used to, when I first read this, I dreaded them because I hadn't yet tried to figure them out. But it's a bit like that very long poem at the beginning of The White Hotel. Who's read D.H. Thomas's The White Hotel? Anybody? Have you, Kathy? It's a terrible, tragic story, but there's this and it's about a psychoanalysis of a person. Well, you don't need to know. The White Hotel. It's very interesting magical realism. There's a brilliant essay in our anthology by John Burt Foster on that novel, The White Hotel. It's about the Holocaust, so I warn you in advance that it's terrible. But there's a very long poem of about 70 or 80 pages at the beginning, and it's this main character's mythic meanderings in her own psyche. And my daughter was encouraging me to read it, and I said, Camille, can I just skip over these pages? I'm not enjoying this. She says, no, you have to read them because later then it's important. These images that circulate become important in the narrative. And sure enough, they do. It's a bit the same here. Was anybody tempted to skip over those passages, or was just I? I guess I love the lines that go like this. But anyway, pay attention to those. Finish the reading. We're going to talk about this page that's the black page with the stars on it. That's also an interesting typographic strategy to get us to read a little more slowly. Alrighty, see you on Thursday.